Hello there, everybody, and welcome back to the Weekly POV. On today's show, we will be discussing The Mandalorian as we head into Season 3. This week's news, including the return of The Lord of the Rings, and I will review The Last of Us Episode 7, Left Behind. And I did say we because Adam is here once again with me this evening. So, Adam, welcome back to the show. So glad to have you back.
I thought that was like a royal we. No. Thank you. I'm happy to be back. I'm happy to be back.
Yeah, as always, very glad to have you here. And
Yeah.
we haven't really we didn't even talk much before we started recording here. So,
No,
what
not
have you
really.
been up to? What have you been watching lately?
Well, I'll go ahead and so as far as like watching, I'll throw out a recommendation for 1923 on Paramount Plus. I am not like a huge Yellowstone fan. My wife is a mega huge Yellowstone fan, so
Hmm.
she loves that show. I've watched a few episodes of it, but it hasn't really ever grabbed my attention so far. But I really enjoyed 1923. I sat down and watched it with her, and it's got some really stellar performances from Harrison Ford and Helen Mirren, Timothy Dalton mixed in there too. Great cast, an interesting, kind of period piece, and you really don't have to have watched Yellowstone at all to really appreciate it for what it is. So it just wrapped up its first season this past Sunday. So if you have a subscription to Paramount Plus, you haven't started it yet, or if you have maybe a free trial waiting to cash in, then you can go ahead and do that now. So
Well, that's it's good to know that I could watch that show without having watched Yellowstone
yeah,
yet, because I've heard really good things about Yellowstone and this series 1923, but I have this huge list of shows that I already need to watch and everything that I've
yeah,
been trying to catch up on. So it's just like another, and being behind in it already, it's just kind of daunting. But knowing that I could just maybe watch this one with Harrison Ford in it and everything might be an
yeah.
option.
You
So.
definitely could. I mean, I get the feeling that there's probably some stuff in there that I didn't appreciate that I would have appreciated if I'd watched Yellowstone and the other one, 1883, I think it was.
Yeah,
Um, but on its own, I think it stands pretty well. So
nice. I might have to give that a try here. Maybe over the summer I'll have a little more time to, binge watch some shows. So thanks for that recommendation.
yeah.
I have been getting ready for The Mandalorian season 3 by watching The Mandalorian season 2, and I'm also going to watch those few episodes of Boba Fett that included The Mandalorian because they were the best of episodes of that show, in my opinion. And you know,
They
I'm
really were.
excited about anything that John Favreau and Dave Filoni are involved in, just because uh, that they have delivered for me in terms of the Mandalorian the most exciting and um, kind of feels like Star Wars show for me on Disney Plus. And I'm a big fan, obviously, of like The Force Awakens. I loved Rogue One, but next to those two movies, The Mandalorian is up there for the Star Wars content that's come out from Disney. So I'm really excited about season 3 and going back into season 2 and watching some of that and just being reminded of why I love that show so much has been fun.
Mhm.
And it's really, I forgot that it's been a couple years since season 2 was on television. We had that
Yeah,
year
yeah.
where Boba Fett came out last year or
Hmm.
the year before or whatever in December. And so it's been a while.
Yes, it
So
has.
yeah, so I'm really excited for season 3 to start up, and it's good getting to revisit that. So
Yeah,
yeah,
for sure.
but that is what we have been up to, and those are our recommendations for this week. And next up, we're going to head into our news segment, and we're going to start with the Mandalorian season 3 and when it's going to debut here. Okay, so Disney Plus will officially release the first episode of The Mandalorian Season 3 at 3 a.m. Eastern Time, 12 a.m. Pacific on Wednesday, March 1st. And this is going to there's going to be 8 weekly installments until the finale on April 19th. It doesn't seem like there'll be any break in there or anything. It's just going to go straight through those 8 weeks. And I I can never stay up till 3 a.m. obviously to watch
I've
the
only ever seen an episode of 3
episodes,
a.m.
but
once, and that's because I got woken up early, so I just watched it while I was awake. But I've
right.
never actually stayed up until 3.
And I don't normally have we don't normally have school off on a Thursday, so that doesn't
No.
happen too often. Maybe if that happens, then I'll stay up till 3 to watch it. Um, but Adam, I feel like we need to try to get together for this, and maybe we can figure something out.
Okay.
So
Yeah, for sure.
hopefully we can watch some of these together on Wednesdays.
For sure.
Um, but yeah, what are your thoughts on season 3? If you've seen any of it yet, any of the previews or anything, or are you going in completely blind,
I'm
or
going
do
in
you have any?
pretty blind. I
Okay.
saw one of the teasers, but that's about it. But other than that, I'm really going in pretty blind. So
Yeah. Are
I've come to
there?
prefer that. I really have.
That can be a good strategy.
Yeah.
um, do you have any expectations for season 3? Any wishes, things that you'd like to see?
Well, I would just like to see, and I don't know, I don't want to harp on this, but I would just like to see how the Corano stuff is handled, um,
Hmm.
because that's, I mean, the show isn't gonna crash or anything because she's not there. I understand that, but she did feel like she was a part of the plans going forward at the end of season 2.
Yeah.
So I don't want it to feel like she just kind of dropped off, or I don't want her to say, "Oh, she's busy right now." Like that kind of
Hmm.
stuff just doesn't work for me. So I want to see how they handle that. Just make sure that story is still uninterrupted, and doesn't suffer because of everything that happened there.
Yeah, I agree. I really I'm curious to see how they handle that and what they do with that. I mean, I think she was definitely at the very least going to be in Rangers of the New Republic when that show was going to be coming out. And I don't know if they're even going to do that show anymore. But I feel like she was a big part of the show. I'm not going to call this person out by name, but I did see a tweet the other day that I had to comment on because it was a pretty popular Star Wars podcaster who had tweeted that it wouldn't even bother him if they don't even mention Cara Dune at all, and I'm like, that would kind of bother me. I mean, we don't just like
Hmm.
pretend this person didn't exist in this show because they have a different opinion from us. So sometimes I feel compelled to say things. It's kind of rare when I do that on social media, but in that situation, I felt compelled to kind of say I don't know about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think there has to be some kind of
Yeah.
explanation.
No, I agree.
But what do you guys think? What are you hoping for season 3 out there? Leave a comment. I know that I'm really curious to see the whole Mandalorian storyline and how that's going to resolve itself with the dark saber and going back to Mandalore. I'm excited about. I really want to see with Grogu because I just watched the Jedi episode with Ahsoka from season 2, and she talks about how he was basically rescued from the temple during Order 66, and I'm curious to see like who got him out and what happened there. So I want to see a little more backstory there with Grogu,
You think we'll
and
get that
also
in this
yeah,
show?
I do. I
Okay.
think we'll get that. I think we might even get that in this season. At least more of it. I don't know if
Yeah.
we'll get the full picture
I've
in this
always kind of
season,
wondered
but
that if that's a story that they tell in this show or if that's something they
mhm,
save for later.
right. And I think we'll get it. That's just my prediction. But I also want to find out more about what was going on with the cloning. And I don't want to say too much here, Adam, because I did watch the trailer and everything.
No,
And
you can say
we're
what you. Don't
okay.
worry about it. You're fine.
Well, there's a certain shot in the trailer that shows what looks like Coruscant and Dr. Pershing, and so I hope we're going to go more into like what were they doing? Were they trying to create Snoke with those clones, or was this another project?
Right.
I'm still curious about it. How much is this going to lead into the sequel trilogy with the First Order and Snoke and the Emperor and that type of thing, and how much is maybe not? So I hope we get some of those answers too.
Yeah. Yeah, it would be nice.
Those are some of my hopes.
Yeah, it'd be nice to go back to some of those story threads from the first season and answer some of those questions.
Yeah, so we will see what happens, and I can't wait until Wednesday. Next up, we're going to talk about Ted Lasso season 3. There was a trailer that released today, actually. And the series will be returning on March 15th. The trailer teases the aftermath following last season's finale. Here on comingsoon.net, it says AFC Richmond advanced to the Premier League, and Nate joined as a coach of the West Ham United team, and just some of the fallout from that. Adam, have you watched Ted Lasso?
I've watched about half of the first season, and I liked what I saw. I just haven't come back to it yet.
Yeah, it's really good. It's kind of one of those shows it's funny, in heartwarming show and has a lot of heart at the same time. So there's that element of comedy to it, but there's really good character development, and there's this real like kind of heart to the whole thing. So it's a very unique show that I've really come to appreciate. So, so yeah, the trailer is now on the Apple TV YouTube channel, and the new season is coming out March 15th. So Adam, I definitely
Nice.
recommend you checking out more of this show.
Yeah, I always envision myself coming back to it at some point. So
Yeah, I think it's one that you'll enjoy. But,
yeah.
All right, well, let's head over to the box office results for this week. This was an interesting weekend at the box office. So we had Cocaine Bear, which I think looks completely ridiculous.
It is.
Did you see it?
Denise really wanted to see it, so
Oh,
I took her to
okay.
see it. It is.
So you were part of this 23 million that it brought in,
Yeah,
huh?
unfortunately. Well, I don't know. Does a free Cinemark thing actually kind of count, because it's just kind of a $10 monthly thing that I may have paid for like 6 months ago?
That feels like a deep philosophical question that I don't know how to answer. It may or may not count.
It is. It's an adventure. I'll say that. How about
It's an
that?
adventure. Okay, fair enough. So there's
For what it
Cocaine Bear.
is, I think it was
Is
exactly
it
what it.
entertaining?
I mean, I chuckled a little bit, but it was like it was not really my kind of movie. So,
Okay.
um,
Okay.
it was, for the kind of horror gore fest comedy thing that it tried to be. That's exactly what it was. So,
Okay. Fair enough. So it did well. It brought in 23 million domestically over the weekend. Jesus Revolution made 15.5 million. Which was those were good enough for second and third at the box office. Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania still came in on top with 32.2 million in week number 2. But it did take a big, like almost 70% drop, which is the largest drop for the second weekend for an MCU title. I'm not sure what to make of that. I don't know if you have any thoughts.
I think it kind of really goes back to, unless a Marvel movie, with the way Disney has been doing their quick releases on Disney Plus, unless it's a major Marvel movie, I think that's just going to happen. I think that's what they have done to themselves, by doing these real quick turnarounds on Disney Plus. Unless it's like a Spider-Man or like an Avengers level movie,
Yeah.
it's just they're going to have to deal with that.
That makes sense. I will say that I really enjoyed Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania. I reviewed it after I saw it, and I enjoyed it. I mean, it's definitely different, and it's a lot of time is spent in the quantum realm, and it's a little goofy and bizarre. But for me, it was like a good kind of bizarre. Like I
Yeah, I
enjoyed
mean,
it.
Ant-Man is usually a little bit more goofy than
Yeah.
some of the other ones. I mean, that's just kind of for me, that's just kind of the Paul Rudd effect of it. But And then going into the quantum realm, I mean, I come kind of expecting that. I haven't seen it yet, but I mean, that's what I would expect out of it. So
Yeah, I'll tell you what, it was cool. I enjoyed the world building. I enjoyed getting to see more of the quantum realm and kind of like what that world was like. And Kang, Jonathan Majors was unbelievable. And I think, this is an important movie in the MCU, in my opinion, because it not only is it opening phase five, but it's introducing the villain of phase five. Um, in this way. So I hope more people will check it out, even if it's eventually when it comes out, on Disney Plus.
I mean,
But
you're not alone. 83% on audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. So I mean, it's one of those that
yeah, it got a
is
low
not going to
critic
be critically well
rating.
received, but then it
Hmm.
seems like a good chunk of the people that go see it enjoy it. So, and
Yeah,
that's what
yeah, that
matters, really.
that's where I was with it too. I enjoyed it. Um, I don't know anything about Jesus Revolution. Adam, can you tell me anything about that movie? Do you know anything about that one?
Yeah, that's so as far as actors go, that's Kelsey Grammer and Jonathan Rumi, who plays Jesus in The Chosen.
Hmm.
Um, they're telling the story of kind of the Jesus craze from the late '60s, early '70s, that kind of spread through hippie culture,
Hmm.
and uh, and then this particular story is how that kind of meshed with a local church with an older pastor played by Kelsey Grammer,
Okay.
who's trying to figure out how to uh, reach and talk to not just the younger crowd, this hippie crowd, but also try to bridge that gap between them and his normal congregation at his church. So
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure if this was like a serious take on, Christianity, or if it was some kind of, you know, I didn't really know what it was. I don't know. Maybe the
no, it's
marketing
definitely
was
serious. Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So yeah, I might have to check that out at some point. I don't know if you know. I for some reason I just wasn't really aware of this movie. I hadn't seen previews for it or
Not a
anything.
lot
So.
of marketing around it. It's kind of a lower,
Hmm.
like I say, lower budget, but it's not really lower budget. I mean, so that it's from what I've read, it looks great for what the budget is, but I think they're relying mostly on word of mouth, to get this thing moving.
Yeah,
So
yeah, that makes sense because I was gonna say I hadn't seen or heard a lot about this one. So.
yeah, yeah.
But that is the box office for this week, and Creed 3 is going to be opening too, so that'll make things interesting as well to see how well that movie does without Sylvester Stallone involved. So, um, but let's move into our next story here. And Adam, this is the main reason I really wanted to have you on tonight. I mean, I'd love to have you every time, but I know you're a huge Lord of the Rings fan, and when I heard this news, I was surprised. I had a lot of emotions happening. So apparently there are new Lord of the Rings movies in development from Warner Brothers and New Line Cinema. They've made a deal with with Embracer Group AB, who hold the rights to Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. They've made a multi-year deal that will allow Warner Brothers to make new movies based on J.R.R. Tolkien's beloved books. Um, it says we're thrilled to embark on this journey with New Line and Warner Brothers, bringing the incomparable world of J.R.R. Tolkien back to the big screen in new and exciting ways. We understand how cherished these works are, and working together with our partners at New Line and Warner Brothers, we plan to honor the past, look to the future, and adhere to the strongest level of quality and production values. Um, I mean, that's an encouraging quote, but the first thing that came to my mind was okay, if these are just the rights to The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, what stories are they going to create without recreating any of those movies, without rebooting or without remaking any of them, which would be a terrible decision if they remade them, especially the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And like, what do you tell? What stories do you tell that are going to be interesting enough to get fans to go to the movie theater and come even close to like the Lord of the Rings trilogy? So that's me as a movie only fan. I've read a little bit of the books. I read The Hobbit, but I've read bits and pieces of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. But I know you're a huge fan of Tolkien, so what could they do with this?
Well, they could do something similar to what Amazon was doing with Rings of Power, where they used a lot of the stuff that were in the appendices of Lord of the
Mm-hmm.
Rings. So if they're going to not, kind of reboot Lord of the Rings itself, which I agree with, that would be a terrible. Those movies are aging fantastically well,
Oh, they're
and they
just
would
it's a
be
perfect trilogy in my
all. They
opinion.
might be timeless. So
Mm-hmm.
we'll see on that, but they are really not something that needs to be touched at all. And if they do that, then that's a huge misstep.
Yeah.
There is stuff that they can use in the appendices that would give them starting points. Um, my my worry with that is the same worry that I had with Rings of Power, and I kind of feel like it Rings of Power and The Hobbit really. Where that type of stuff, when they do that and they start filling in the gaps on their own, it's never quite as interesting
Yeah.
as it is when they just follow the source material.
Mm-hmm.
We
Mm-hmm.
saw that in The Hobbit. Definitely saw it in Rings of Power for me, at least. And see it in the games when they do things like Shadow of Mordor and all that stuff. It's never quite as interesting as it is when it's actual Tolkien stuff.
Yeah.
So if that's the plan, or if they're just kind of going off and just basing it on Lord of the Rings and that universe and just kind of telling their own story, then that is not exciting to me. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know how I would feel about that, to be honest. So it's I get excited for the stories that Tolkien told, and when it's not one of those stories, and when it's just kind of, you know made up in that world, it's never quite as fun for me. So I don't even know how I'd feel if that's the case.
Yeah, I hear you. I don't know how I would feel about it either. And I mean, somebody mentioned to me today who's also a fan that could could they do something that takes place after Return of the King? Would that make any sense? You
Um,
know, the
I don't know. Again, like there is stuff in the appendices that kind of wraps up the story
Mhm.
after those events. I don't know how much of that would be interesting enough for any type of movie experience. It
Right.
really kind of feels like it was just tying up loose ends. Uh, the kind of idea behind Lord of the Rings is that it's like this prehistory to our history, right?
Mhm.
So it it takes place in Middle Earth, which is Earth, and it's kind of like this ancient prehistory for us. So you start getting too far ahead, and then you're just going to start telling our own
You're
history,
gonna Yeah.
theoretically, right?
Mhm.
Um, so is there some stuff they could do? Yeah, but again, I think they're going to have to start kind of making up their own stories. So um, if if they are not confined to just the two, The Hobbit and then the Lord of the Rings series, there's some other stuff that they can do in like first and second age, uh, things like that. That could be very interesting. And
Right.
if that's what they do, I think that there's some meat there for them to work with. But other than that, if they're telling their own stories inside that world, I don't think I'm going to be very excited for that at all.
And do you know if does Amazon have certain rights that the New Line and Warner Brothers would not have? Do you know anything about that or where that line is?
Not that
Or
I'm aware of. There was some speculation about how much they used from the appendices, and then could they have used any of that stuff from any other works like the Silmarillion or stuff. And I had read
Mhm.
something along the line that the like I forget exactly who it was, but it might have been the Tolkien estate said that they just all they had really had to do if they wanted to use that stuff was just ask and approach them.
Yeah.
It sounded like they did not use that stuff, but it sounds like possibly, if I'm remembering right, It sounds like it could be the case that those materials could be open for use if desired. So
Yeah. Well, that could make things a little more interesting. Is it at all encouraging to you that Peter Jackson has been kept in the loop with this whole process? And also, I think who are the other ones that have been involved? Is it Fran Walsh and um,
so
I'm trying to think.
Rings of Power, if I'm remembering right, I believe that um, Peter Jackson was in some early talks for that stuff, but then they kind of just moved away from that.
Hmm.
So, is it encouraging? Yes. Is it too early to tell? Also, yes. So
Okay.
that's
Yeah, I get
yeah,
here are the names I was thinking of. Peter Jackson and his writing partners Fran Walsh and Philippa Boyens. They all worked on like the original Lord of the Rings trilogy, and I believe the Hobbit trilogy as well. Um, so I mean, I guess it's a good thing that they're being kept in the loop and involved in the process, um, but yeah, I don't know. As excited as I should have been about new Lord of the Rings, also was not excited and worried
yeah,
actually. So yeah, we'll
yeah.
see.
I mean, I don't. I guess I'd only really be worried if they have those plans to retell those stories.
Right.
Um, Other than that, I guess they can really do what they want.
Hmm.
They have the rights, and I'm not sure that I'd be worried if they kind of make up their own stories, but I'm also not going to be extremely interested in it either. So
Yeah, that's fair. That's a fair point. So see what they do and give it a try. Um, any more thoughts on the return of the Lord of the Rings?
um I don't think so. I think that about covers it really.
Okay,
Be
fantastic.
interesting to
Well,
see because I mean I guess Rings of Power is supposed to fit into this universe as well. Um but maybe it might be interesting to see if maybe Warner Brothers maybe kind of does their own thing around the Rings of Power. So
yeah,
which could
I was
also happen.
wondering if it's all like part of one thing now or if it's separate. So I'll be
Yeah.
curious to see what happens going
Yeah.
forward. Yeah. Well, last but not least, we have a little bit of news about The Last of Us, episode 8. The trailer for this episode features the game actor Troy Baker, who actually portrayed the role of Joel in the games, is going to be showing up as a different character in the TV show in the role of James. Um, and if I remember this character correctly in the game, and you could see this in the episode 8 preview on the HBO Max YouTube channel, but this character in the game was so frustrating. And I remember trying to like defeat this guy like for it took for me so long. It was so frustrating, and that's my memory of this character, if this is the character I think it is. So it'll be interesting to see him in this role, and that's going to lead me right into my review of episode 7 of The Last of Us, called Left Behind. All right, so let's get into season 1, episode 7 of The Last of Us. This episode is called Left Behind. This was another fantastic episode. I know I keep saying that, and I probably sound like a broken record, but I think this is just a very well done show. It's a great adaptation of a video game. Again, the best adaptation of a video game I've probably ever seen. This episode is actually based off of DLC content called Left Behind, the same name, that came out when the video game came out originally in 2013. And it tells kind of a little bit more of Ellie's backstory before she was, bit by one of the infected. And this kind of tells that story of how that happened. I thought this was a great episode. Again, spoiler free. I would definitely recommend this episode, and I'm going to get into in this review. I'm going to talk about some of the plot points of this episode and get into some spoilers here, and then I'm going to look at some of the insights from the podcast and inside the episode, and then talk about the game versus show comparison. So that's basically what this review will look like. So let's go ahead and head into the plot points for this episode. Basically, Ellie, it picks up where it left off in the last episode, where Joel was stabbed with a shard of the baseball bat, and now Ellie's managed to bring him into this like abandoned house and is trying to care for him, and he's basically telling her to leave, like get out of here, go back to Tommy, like I'm not going to make it, and Ellie's not having it. She swears at Joel. She doesn't know what to do, but she wants to stay there with him, and you can see that their relationship is really starting to grow. And then as Ellie's struggling with this decision, we flash back to her at Fedra Military School, basically, and she's running laps in a gym and has a Walkman on and everything. And we see that she gets into this fight with one of her schoolmates, because she knocked the headphones off of Ellie's head and challenges her in that way. And um, she's basically like, one thing that she says is, "You don't fight, your friend fights for you, and she's not here." And that's referencing the Riley character, who has been gone for a few weeks and was Ellie's roommate and best friend and everything. But Ellie fights back. She decides to fight here, which is kind of a theme in this episode of continuing the fight, that leads all the way into what happens at the end of the episode, and it kind of comes back around with Joel and everything. So here, Ellie's basically, sitting in the principal's office, and he's telling her that she has basically a couple options. One option is she can end up keep getting thrown back in the hole, not following the rules, and she ends up, doing one of the dirtier jobs for Fedra, or she can use her intelligence and her abilities to become an officer. And she's kind of struggling with that decision. And we also get some interesting shots of things in Ellie's room. We see the No Pun Intended book that kind of goes back to one of the earlier episodes where she was telling Joel those pun jokes and everything. We see the comic book that she reads also in her room, and a Mortal Kombat 2 poster, which is a nice setup for a moment that happens later in the episode, in the arcade, actually. But Ellie's best friend and roommate Riley has been missing for a few weeks, but she comes in and surprises Ellie and returns, and she talks about how she joined the Fireflies, basically, and Ellie can't believe she joined, and a lot of this episode is just kind of this philosophical argument about Fedra versus the Fireflies, and Ellie kind of sides with Fedra a little bit, saying something to the effect of, they're kind of the glue that holds everything together. If we didn't have Fedra, everything would be in chaos, nobody would be getting fed, all those things. But then on the other side of that, Riley's trying to say, well, the Fireflies are basically freedom fighters. They're fighting for freedom, and she was calling Fedra fascists, basically. So a lot of this is their kind of back and forth banter about Fedra versus the Fireflies and those different ideologies. One of the things that stood out to me is, Riley basically takes Ellie to this place, and she takes her. We find out it's the mall, and she's taking her there to just have a nice night and everything together, because she's eventually going to reveal this information that she's leaving. But one thing I really enjoyed was seeing Ellie like hit the flashlight to get it to work, because that's something that you have to do in the video game. You actually have to like hit your controller or tilt it and hit it off your hand to try to get the flashlight to work, which I thought was a nice little nod to the video game. We also find out that there recently there's now power in the mall, and Ellie's kind of fascinated by that, and we get this really cool shot of the mall just lighting up, and all the stores and shops lighting up, and all the neon colors and everything. And I thought that was just a really cool shot from this episode. And Riley basically wants to show Ellie the four wonders of the mall. And one of those, whether intended or not, is the escalator. Ellie's absolutely fascinated by the escalator, and she calls it the electric stairs and and everything. So that was, we have a character here who hasn't seen a lot of these things. She's grown up in a Fedra school, military school. So another one of these four wonders of the mall is this carousel that they ride on, and again, I feel like this episode was once again a very, very good adaptation um, from like the game to this episode with the DLC content and everything. So many of these moments were I remembered, vividly from the game. We also get them visiting the photo booth and taking pictures in there. And as you can see, if you're watching the YouTube video, it's pretty similar that they're in this photo booth and taking silly pictures and everything. So that was a nice moment too. Um, the the other wonders of the mall are the arcade, and once they go into the arcade, that's where Ellie gets to play Mortal Kombat 2. So again, it kind of ties back to that poster, and she obviously is obsessed with this game and gets to play it and everything. Um, and then the last thing that they go into is this horror store, where they put on these masks and everything. But before that even happens, Riley basically tells Ellie that Marlene, and again, that's a callback to the Marlene character we saw in episode 1, who's the leader of the Fireflies. She's sending her to the Atlanta QZ, and Riley basically brought Ellie to the mall to say goodbye. And Riley is, while Ellie is kind of different in this way because she didn't necessarily have a family that she remembers, Riley did have a family that she remembers from before all of this. And she's seeking that connection with that family, and she's finding that with the Fireflies. Um, and this whole episode really shows this connection that Riley and Ellie have, and it's kind of like this whole will they won't they type of thing with their relationship. Is it more than friendship? And of course, like any good thing that happens in this show, there's always something really terrible that happens after that really good thing for the characters happens. So these two characters share this kiss, and they've had this night together, and then right after that they get attacked by one of the infected. And this is where we see where Ellie gets bit. And because we didn't see that before episode 1, or in episode 1, or in any of the other episodes until this point. Now we see how she got bit in the first place, and Riley also gets bit. And so they're basically just sitting there kind of consoling each other, trying to figure out what they're going to do. Are they going to take the easy way out like Frank and Bill did? Um, but that's not what Riley wants to do. Riley tells Ellie that she doesn't want to give up or take the easy way out. She wants to enjoy the time she has with Ellie, whether it's 2 hours or 2 days, I think is what she says. And it's really this flashback that prompts Ellie not to give up on Joel. And at the end of the episode, she ends up finding a needle and thread and tries to stitch him up because she's determined, Riley didn't give up on me. I'm not going to give up on you. And it's this flashback that really pushes her to what she does at the end of the episode. She's not going to leave Joel at this point. She's going to try whatever she can to save him and stay with him for whatever time they have together. So a very cool episode that pushes the story forward by going into the past, which is always cool. And a little more insight into this episode from the Last of Us podcast and inside the episode. Again, I mentioned that this episode is based off DLC content that came out. There was no cold open for this episode, and they kind of asked the question, what does this episode want? So it's an interesting question to ask. This episode apparently didn't want a cold open, so there wasn't one. Originally, this episode wasn't going to tie into what was going on with Joel at the beginning and end. It was just going to stand alone as this Left Behind story based on the DLC, but HBO suggested they should have that story with Joel in there to tie things together, which I agree. I think that was the right move. You see Joel in the beginning and end of this episode, and this flashback kind of informs what the character Ellie does. So I think that was the right choice. This episode also intentionally shows a different side of Fedra. We've seen the really evil side of Fedra, the bad side of them. Um, but Ellie again even describes them kind of as the glue holding things together, and it shows this different side of Fedra. And basically, how Neil Druckmann summed this up, he said this episode is basically the post-apocalyptic version of skipping school. um, so I want to get into finally before I end this review, I want to get into those comparisons, the game versus TV comparisons. And again, this was a very faithful adaptation of the DLC content, and you're going to see that, especially if you're watching on YouTube. You're going to see how close some of these things were. First of all, we see Ellie taking care of Joel in this scene right here, as she's trying to patch him up and do what she can for him to put pressure on the wound. And um, we see that that's happening. We also see that in this next scene, Riley comes in and surprises Ellie in a similar way in both the show and the game. In this comparison, we see the carousel scene in both the show and the game, and how similar they are. This, again, was a big part of the game. So there's the reveal of the carousel in the game. And here's the scene from the photo booth. You can see the game here first and then the show. So in this comparison, we see the arcade, the Raha's arcade in both the game and the show. And again, just like the neon colors and everything really stands out here. And Ellie plays the Mortal Kombat game and in the driving game in both the show and the game. Pretty cool. Here we see the characters going into the horror shop or the Halloween store or whatever it is, and they're trying on the wolf and the clown masks and dancing on top of the counter and everything. In the game, they dance without the masks on, and in the show they dance with them on. But it's very, again, a very similar scene. Here we see the reveal of the bite mark and how that happens in both the game and the show. And finally, in this scene between Riley and Ellie, there's very similar dialogue as they're, talking about, as Riley's saying, let's wait it out, whether it's 2 hours or 2 days, and that whole dialogue. They decide that they're gonna wait it out together, and until the end here. So that's pretty much where the episode and our comparisons end. And that was episode 7 of The Last of Us, and going into episode 8. As I said earlier on the show, in the news segment, we're going to see Troy Baker, who played Joel. He's going to come into the live action TV show and be in a different role. So it'll be interesting to see him in episode 8. But what did you guys think of The Last of Us episode 7, Left Behind? Let me know in the comments section, and stay tuned to the Weekly POV for your weekly Last of Us reviews. Okay, everybody, thank you once again for tuning in, and that pretty much wraps it up for our show this week. Thank you so much again, Adam, for joining me once again. And where can
thanks for the invite.
Oh, anytime. You're invited every Monday when I record.
Cool.
You know that.
Yeah, I do.
Where can the good people find you, sir?
Twitter would be the best place at the Gauze85 there, and you can also find me on doing my church stuff at SavannahUMChurch.com.
Thank you very much, Adam. Of course, you can find From a Certain Point of View on the YouTube channel, From a Certain Point of View. Please subscribe while you're there. On Facebook, we are From a Certain Point of View. On Twitter, it is at certainpovpod, and you can send us an email at certainpovpod@gmail.com. You can ask us anything, or if you'd like to be part of the show or come up with an idea for the show, please let me know. We are also a proud member of the Red 5 Network. You can find them on red5network.com or at red5network on Twitter. And everything we said today was true.
From a certain point of view.